Hello, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Living History in Series for the International Euphonium Summit. I'm your host, Nicholas Haffter Von Heide, and we have our special guest today for his first in series, Dr. Stephen Barr. Welcome to the International Euphonium Summit.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. For just everybody getting used to this format and getting to know us as Farm for Dreams and the International Euphonium Summit, you can find out more information in the link below by clicking on www.internationaleuphoniumsummit.com/Stephen with a PH dash bar, BARR, for all his information, his works, and where to pick them up and to perform if you're part of our cohort. And some really cool stuff coming up you won't want to miss being part of our cohort and playing Dr. Stephen Barr's music as well as everyone else in our cohort and earning that reward system that we've been developing for the rising artists in community and rising composers in community, from stuff to commissions, premieres, to actually earning a euphonium and being able to earn equipment for those compositions, like possible the Ableton software we covered beforehand in our podcast, which went for a bit about an hour and a half, which we discuss all sorts of really cool stuff you won't want to miss. And once I release those for your podcast listening, links will be below, and especially at internationaleuphoniumsummit.com/Stephen-Barr. So welcome to the stage again, and thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dive into your first in series and begin when you kind of first recall, or maybe even your parents' kind of input on when you started with music.
Well, um, I did not come from a specifically musical household. Um, my mom sang. She was not trained, but she enjoyed singing, and so I don't know if that's where I kind of got started or not. But I didn't have any um, piano lessons when I was younger, or any real exposure to um, art music. I hate, there's no good word for it, classical art, concert music, they all sound elitist to me, but maybe concert music is the best one, I guess. But yeah, I didn't go. I think in grade school there were a couple field trips to the symphony. I remember at least one of them going to Pittsburgh. Not being terribly engaged with it, or else I think I would remember it better. um but So I didn't have any real extensive background like a lot of others often do. But somewhere along the way, I uh, fell into the school chorus in, I think it was sixth grade. Um, Gosh, and I remember I'm getting off on a quick tangent, but uh, I remember my general music classes were the very old school, sit at your desk and break out a book and sing whatever while the teacher just sat at the piano and played. I mean, that was music class when I was in grade school. Um, Things seem to have come. I don't know if that just wasn't a very good teacher, or if things have evolved so much then. But when I saw general music courses when I was teaching at university, there were just so many amazing things that they were doing now that you know, participatory, like we were talking about earlier, that were not a part of my um, early musical experiences. So I think somewhere between getting into the school choir, and I couldn't even tell you why I did that. I don't remember um, that far back, and just finding an enjoyment and listening to music, both popular and film scores. I do remember that. I just do remember really digging film music. I was one of the people who would go out and buy the score. They were on cassette then. Um, but listening to those just nonstop. Uh,
What was your favorite one?
oh, you would ask that.
Of course I would.
Well, I'll tell you what. I had the Aladdin soundtrack from Disney, and I loved that. And I loved that soundtrack. And I listened. It wasn't just, I didn't just listen to the songs. I listened to the whole Alan Menken score. So I loved the tracks. And that's still, I think, so I watched that movie, and then I got the soundtrack, and then you learn the music, and then I would go watch the movie again. And that is something that when I do go to a movie, um, like a theater, which is not often, but if it's a movie that I'm really interested in, I like to listen to the music, uh, sometimes before it, sometimes after it, and then put all that together with the visual and see what the composer did. Um,
So I kind of want a tangent for those that didn't listen to the podcast segment before watching this video. Is how many of you? Quick question: have hummed the uh, the words out of a movie?
exactly, right? Right. That was, we talked about that briefly. That was, I got to study a little bit of film music with a gentleman named Jack Smalley out at the Aspen Music Festival in 2006. And that was one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is and it might not have even been his quote. When I think about it, I think he attributed it to Steven Spielberg, maybe, who, is a director who has always had a healthy love of and relationship with music, and a composer. A lot of directors do establish favorite composers that they like to work with, because they get a nice relationship going and a rapport. But it might have even been Steven Spielberg that said, "You don't leave the theater humming the dialogue." Just speaking to how important the music is to the movie. Just how weird it would be to uh, to not have music. And sometimes that's what composers do. They just don't. They sit down with the director and say, "Well, we're not going to have music here," and that's for a very specific reason. And often it's to highlight something. And so you say, well, I think actually it would be better just not have the music, and that will bring more attention to it.
So going back
Um,
into the Aladdin soundtrack, and did you make your mom pop that cassette in every time you were in the car?
no, I didn't do that. When I was in the car
Did
with
you have
my
a
parents,
Walkman?
yes, I did, and I had a little boom box, and so that was usually just me punching it in. I used to put them on at night and fall asleep to them. I remember that. Um, no, my parents, listening to things with my parents was a steady diet of mostly oldies, 50s and 60s stuff, which at the time I detested, but somewhere they took hold, and now I know this weird cross section of oldie songs, and rather like them. I don't know them all, but when I hear the Supremes or something like that, I know some of their music, and Patsy Cline. My mom loved Patsy Cline, so uh, that was what I got for musical experiences from my parents. There were some things I couldn't handle. My dad liked Conway Twitty, and I just couldn't get on board with that. Still can't. Um, but I got in the chorus in sixth grade, and that became a regular thing for me. I enjoyed that, and that's probably really the start of any formal quote unquote music training, where I had to start to kind of learn to read. We would have the octavos and sing from the octavos, and there was a lot of rote learning still, but there was the notation there to associate with it. Um, so I sang in choirs all through the rest of my public school education. In eighth grade, I don't remember how far we're going, but in eighth grade, I started playing trombone. That was completely by uh, I want to say accident, but it was more like by command. I decided that I wanted to try joining the band, and I wanted to play saxophone. And so I came up to the band director one day, uh, and I think it was in seventh grade. I hadn't gotten to eighth yet. And I told him I was interested in joining the band, and he happened to be standing in the hall at the time with the choir director, who was my choir director, and my choir director he's a really fascinating guy. Um, he was very old school in the way that conductors and I think older school teachers could get away with being a little more tyrannical and also just a little more off color. So he had just a lineup of jokes about, about the sopranos, about the basses, he wasn't afraid to, every now and then he break out a swear word or something. He wasn't afraid to show a little temper. He would come up to a student and just like playfully punch them in the arm if they made a mistake or something like that. All very, he had this persona of being a tyrant, but everybody loved him because that's not really what he was doing. It was just his shtick. And to this day, he does the same things. I know him. I see him quite frequently, and it's still the same shtick that he mastered a long time ago. But you can't do some of those things today because I don't know, we're overprotective maybe and oversensitive, but that's a whole nother hot button issue to get into. But he happened to be standing there beside the band director. And so I told the band director I wanted to join the band. And she said, well, great. What do you think you want to play? And I said, I want to play saxophone. And as soon as I said that, the choir director stepped up and he went, no, this man needs trombone. You will play trombone. And I'm just this little seventh grader looking up at him. I go, okay. And so I played trombone. And that's kind of how I fell into instrumental music and really enjoyed doing that quite a bit. Even did pick up a euphonium from time to time. We did what is it, the Holst, not this first, no, I can't remember which suite it is. I think that has the Hammersmith. I think that's the right movement, but we didn't have anybody who could play it. We didn't have it, so I picked up a baritone and learned it and played that solo. So, and then every now and then I would break that out. I was not a good baritone player by any stretch of the imagination. I was just competent enough to get whatever needed to be done on it done. But played in the jazz band, and I think all of those instrumental experiences were super helpful to me in learning about just notation and learning how to play and feel rhythm and learning about ensemble things in a different way than you do in a choir. I mean, in high school choirs and community choirs and stuff, there's a lot of rote learning, but if you're going to play in a band, you got to be able to read. So, which are, there's two very different things, and they each have their advantages and disadvantages. But I think that instrumental side of my education was really very, very, very important to teach me some things that just being in a choir wasn't going to teach me. And so when I was teaching university, that was a line that I broke out a lot of times. I said, those of you who are singers, you need to be playing an instrument. And those of you who are instrumentalists, you need to be singing, because the two complement each other in so many ways.
So,
and whenever I saw a deficiency of some sort, a basic music deficiency, I think I could almost pinpoint it to, well, you don't sing in a choir, do you? Or you have never engaged with any difficult rhythms because you haven't played an instrument, or you don't read as well as you should because you haven't played an instrument. So there's a lack. For me, it's piano, because I didn't have any formal piano lessons, and I regret not having had those. So I am not a terribly gifted piano player. I can noodle around on it enough to get by sometimes, but anything complicated just doesn't happen. I'm no good at it.
So what was it like when you brought home the trombone? Did you tell your mom and did you tell your parents that you wanted to go in band before you approached the band director, or did you just do the approach the how did that go?
I don't remember, but it's quite possible that I came home and announced that I needed a trombone. That probably is the way it went down. I'd have to ask my mother.
That'd be cool. So we'll capture that on the next in series. Hopefully, see if Stephen can get some background on that. Perhaps, perhaps not. We'll see
My
on that.
my parents were always very supportive. They uh, they came to every concert. They did not have the musical background. They did not provide me with that because they didn't know. Until sixth or eighth grade, I never showed any much of an inkling of being interested in going that in that direction. But when I did start singing in the choir and when I started playing in the band, they didn't miss a concert. They came to my marching band games. They came to everything. So
That's
they were always super, super supportive.
that's phenomenal. I think we're gonna segment into the post interview with this, and as he's going into the eighth grade playing trombone, captured the euphonium with the second suite, and picking up jazz band. Those are really great segments of learning the aspect and what he picked up, what Dr. Stephen Barr picked up through those years, and moving forward to incorporate that with the singing aspect, and learning more about his high school and developing that into his collegiate years on his second in series. So, with that being said, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for Dr. Stephen Barr's first in series. You can find more information below. Find his channels either up here or here on YouTube, and for more information. And if you yourself are a euphonium player or composer who knows that you have some intrinsic value with your story, being able to connect with at least one person, because every story connects with someone. Every story. And your story is almost as important as any of our cohort. We'd love to have you a part of our cohort, and that this experience and this beautiful framework that we've been developing. For more information, check us out, internationaleuphoniumsummit.com/Stephen with a PH dash bar with a double R. And if you would like to, you can check out and book your first in series on the Farm for Dreams or at Euphonium Summit YouTube link that is in the introduction of the channel. For the time being, thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Barr. Thank you for joining us for your first
Thank you.
series and taking us through your background and your appreciation now for Patsy Cline and the Supremes, and not so much Conway Twitty,
Yeah, not so much.
and taking us into your instrumental framework that you've started to acquire during your middle school years. Until next time, check us out on the podcast. Links below once it's listed on your favorite podcast. And we'll see you next time, everyone. Bye, everyone.